So many people told me I was going to regret getting divorced. I was married to a doctor. We had been together about 13 years. We had a kid together. Nothing would ever be the same again, they would say. They were right about that, but not in the way they thought they were. I will tell you that honestly, I've never regretted my divorce for one day. But I also wasn't fully prepared for the heartache that would come post divorce. Not about the breakup, but about the rest of the fallout. At first, leaving was the best I had felt in my entire adult life. I had emotionally processed the breakup before I chose to separate and file for divorce. I had done such a good A+ 5-star job preparing for the divorce. I was like, I did it. And I genuinely thought that his dad and I would figure things out about childcare, meeting each other's significant others, do all of this amicably, and we would both just move on, loving this absolute miracle of a little boy quietly and amicably. Adorable. I was wrong. If you are somewhere in this process and your feelings are not exactly matching what you would expected, if you feel fine when you think maybe you should feel devastated, or you feel devastated when everyone around you thinks that you should be fine by now, I want to walk with you through that today. Welcome back to Breaking Upward. I'm Rachel Newhouse. Before we get into today's episode, as always, nothing in this podcast is legal, financial, or therapeutic advice. I'm speaking from my own experience, research, and it's not guidance for your specific situation based on your specific life. So please work with licensed professionals who know your case. So I have been spending a lot of time recording these, getting this whole Breaking Upward thing going, and I've really been stressing about it. And today I was like thinking about oh, what do I wear? People say colors and things like that. And I was just like, honestly, forget it. I'm wearing the $10 sweats that I bought at Costco yesterday when I went there for no reason except fun yesterday. So I'm wearing my Costco sweats. My dogs are all in here. I'm drinking my vanilla tea out of my Elvis mug that I got from Graceland. And we're just going to get comfy together today to talk about these things, because as serious as they are, I do think we need to get a little cozy and comfortable to talk about it. Oh gosh, and now we've got Alice. I have all of my dogs in here, and I don't know if I've said this on the podcast, but Alice, she's my little girl. Ooh, come on, Alice. She'll probably be sitting with me for the remainder of this. If you're listening to this, you can't see it. But if you're seeing the video, you can see my little Allie girl. Alice is completely deaf. She is albino, and she has some brain damage issues. And she very much likes to be held 24/7. So we're going to podcast together today. So if you hear little squeaks like that, if you hear little puppy noises, that's Alice. Okay, so now me and Alice are going to talk to you about what the research actually says. So what do we know? Most of what people believe about the emotional experience of divorce is based on outdated or bad or misinterpreted science. There's an assumption, usually a cultural assumption. It's like a thing that your well-meaning family members communicate to you, that divorce is devastating, it's grief-inducing, and that recovery follows something like a linear path, like devastation to acceptance eventually. I if you don't know, I am a nurse by training, and I have watched people grieve the deaths of loved ones, grieve an HIV diagnosis, grieve a pregnancy loss, and there is no such thing as linear grief in my experience. It doesn't follow a line. The research doesn't even support it. Modern divorce adjustment research is really clear about this too. The emotional experience of divorce isn't linear. It doesn't follow predictable stages, and it doesn't look the same for everyone. There's a sociologist, his name's Paul Amato. He's at Penn State. He has studied divorce outcomes for decades and found that the quality of your marriage before your divorce is the strongest predictor of the emotional experience after divorce. What does that mean? So, if your marriage was bad and had you in a really bad place, you might experience real relief from that. It's not denial to have relief after that. It's an accurate reading of the situation. Studies consistently find that roughly a third of divorcing women, especially those who initiated the divorce, and side note here, the vast majority of divorces are initiated by women. Women report relief as their dominant initial emotion after filing for divorce. Not grief, relief. And then, on average, the harder emotional work begins 6 to 18 months out from that. Not immediately, not right away. Which means if you're in this first phase of feeling unexpectedly fine, it's not like you're ahead of the process or doing the process wrong or you skipped all these stages. You're just right in it. It's not going to happen in this way that people think it does, with like devastation being the first thing that you go through. So let's talk about the liberation phase. This is the first phase that a lot of people go through. For a lot of women, especially the ones who left high conflict or diminishing marriages, the first thing that they feel is relief, even pure, unadulterated joy. I definitely experienced that. Sometimes you experience a kind of lightness that you even forgot you had in yourself and you forgot was possible. The stress and the conflict stop, at least, temporarily, momentarily, and the noise in the house goes down. And you stop bracing for what's coming. You sleep better. You breathe easier. The first year after my divorce, I was like a person who had just been let out of a very stressful room. I could breathe finally. I felt like myself. I had the time of my life in a lot of ways. I traveled all over the place with my son. I was invited to speak in Germany. I was invited to speak in Ireland on some health-related topics. Took him with me everywhere I went to Cuba. We did so many things. I made batch meals and ate leftovers, which doesn't sound like a big deal to you, but my ex used to really rib me about leftovers. And I was like, dude, we're two working professionals. We're going to eat leftovers sometimes. But I would just make a batch meal at the beginning of the week. And I'm like, I don't have to think about food for 5 more days because I don't mind eating the same thing 5 days in a row if it means I don't have to cook and clean for it. I would take my son to Stan's Donuts for donut ice cream sandwiches once a week for breakfast. We shared pancakes and bacon at White Palace Grill and 11 City Diner, each once a week. We took the long way home from school most days, stopping off of the train. We used to take the brown line to the red line where we lived in Chicago, and we would just stop off whenever we saw something we wanted to do. I didn't feel a tinge of guilt or remorse, but everyone else seemed to think that I should. Someone even once said to me, you give exactly 0 ducks living your life now, do you? Like, as if I should. But why would I wallow in grief to pretend to be ashamed when I was so happy? Also, just for the record, I am not against swearing, but to keep this non-explicit for the podcast platforms, and so you can listen with your kids in the car if you wanna, I'm going to not use the F-bomb like I do in my everyday life. Anyways, so there is nothing wrong with you if you're not grieving and people think that you should be ashamed or deep in the pits of grief or despair, and you're just feeling like relief and freedom. There's nothing wrong with that. You left something that was hurting you. Of course it feels better. Then there's this other phase that can hit. We can call this phase 2. I don't know. This isn't super scientific, but another phase. There's a part that nobody warned me about, and this was that the liberation is real for sure, and it can last. But if you were married to a difficult or high conflict or abusive person, they're not going to change because you got divorced unless they're doing the work on that on their own. That is going to introduce a kind of challenge that almost no one understands and almost no one can help you through. At some point, maybe a few months in or a year in, that adrenaline of the divorce, the separation, it can wear off and the conflict can build up. And the practical crisis mode also that you've been in, I think a lot of women do this. Again, not all women, not all men. Let's not go there. But I think a lot of women get into planning mode. Okay, we've got things to do. I need to accomplish this. I need to get this financial thing in order. It's like checklists, right? And when these practical checklists disappear, some of these feelings that you didn't have the bandwidth to feel for a while, like being the default parent, carrying the load of everything, this starts showing up. I had felt so free for so long. And then we had to go back to court for repeated and what I would consider serious violations of our marital settlement agreement and parenting agreement. Then was the first time after the separation that I felt trapped. I did not ever wish I could go back, but the impulse to want to keep my son safe and minimize the emotional damage to myself, it was really overwhelming, and I felt out of control of what was happening. It felt to me like the air was slowly being sucked out of a room that I wasn't allowed to escape from. I had multiple therapists over the years, not at the same time, but I would switch therapists every now and then. They were all really great, honestly, but each understood my situation differently. And I will say, it's not that a therapist without kids can't understand having kids, but I do think a therapist who has at least been that close to kids is going to understand the emotions of a mother more than one who hasn't. Again, I'm sure there's amazing therapists who don't have kids. I'm not ripping on that. But I will say, when I had a therapist who had their own kids, they understood it differently. I also had a therapist who had a child while she was my therapist, and her perspective on my situation changed pretty drastically when she had a kid of her own, and she realized the responsibility, the emotions, the heart that goes into that in a way that you can't. I mean, again, this is not to rip on therapists at all. It's similar to me as a nurse. I was a nurse before I had my son, not for long, but I was. And I was taking care of pregnant patients, and I was taking care of patients with babies long before I had one of my own. And I had a completely different level of empathy and compassion for my patients when I had gone through at least part of what they'd gone through, and I understood the heaviness of some of the things they were going through as a mom, as a woman, as someone who had been pregnant. So again, not to say that therapists can't, but I think sometimes if you can find a therapist who can internalize some of those emotions to start understanding what you're experiencing psychologically, it might be helpful to you too, because that was the most help I think I got in therapy, was when my therapists understood the weight of what I was dealing with when they had experienced some of the weight of that themselves. So my therapist did all understand my situation differently, but my number one criteria for my therapist was that they had to be calm, and they had to help me be able to stay calm in the midst of court battles. Uh, I was in a lot of these court battles, and I needed them to believe me at face value. I am more honest than most people. I don't say that as a badge of honor, and it's not like I've never lied, but the overwhelming guilt that I feel for lying or having to keep a story straight, for me personally, is not worth the pain of just telling the truth. It will go on my head and repeat and repeat and repeat if I lie to someone about something. I can tell you things I've lied about today. I mean, we all lie kind of inadvertently sometimes, but I mean like actual lying. But a lot of people go to their therapists and lie about situations or don't disclose. And I'm pretty painfully honest with my therapist about myself. And I didn't need anyone questioning my credibility or like, is that really what happened? I just didn't need any of that when I was going through this. So my therapists and friends and people close to me were extremely important to me when I was in the pits of this emotional despair and I was worried about my son's well-being. Grief and divorce, it's not like a wave that crashes and then recedes. It's more like weather. It changes. It's not always storming, but it keeps coming back. And even sometimes you see it on the horizon and it comes, and sometimes you don't see it coming and it's there at all. And it's not on a timeline you can predict or plan for. There are going to be storms that you face with your kids, your ex, that you have never anticipated. And if I have one regret for going through my divorce, it's for how I let those emotions really take over my psyche for years. Yes, I had a therapist, but I also have a really strong history of anxiety paired with some reality-rooted serious fears, and that was a bad combination for me. I hadn't done the work around how to cope when things are bad and there's no way out. I had grown up in a evangelical tradition where it was like, pray and God will bring you peace and God will bring you joy and, peace comes in the morning. There were all these things. And I was like, I don't feel that. And like, what do I do when this won't stop? Or I think it's joy comes in the morning or something in the Bible. Anyways, the mental frame that I went into all of it with, it didn't work and it didn't help me, to be honest. Now I study a very different tradition. I study Tibetan Buddhism almost daily, and it's getting better for me. I even hesitate to say I study Buddhism because I feel like it's going to sound like I'm some Zen master when I am absolutely not that at all, but I study it because I'm not good at it. I don't study things that I think I am perfect at. So one thing that Thich Nhat Hanh, he was a Tibetan Buddhist monk, he said that I've really started to do now is when I feel completely overwhelmed and things are legitimately scary or hard or challenging and out of my control, I picture comforting myself the way I comforted my son when he was a toddler. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about comforting yourself as a baby. And it's easier for me to picture this as a mom because I don't know how much I was comforted as a young person, but I really did that for my son. I never had judgment for my son when he was scared. I would hold him, rock him, walk him around, sway with him, hug him tightly as long as he needed until he felt better again. So I've come up with my own way of doing this in my home. For me, swinging is actually really good. I have a swing chair, just sitting in, even that gentle back and forth motion is really good for my brain, I think, for calming. I also have in-house sound baths that I do for myself sometimes. So if I'm overwhelmed, I find a sound bath on YouTube. I surround myself with pillows in my bed, kind of tuck them into my sides. I prop my knees up with a pillow. I put an aromatherapy eye pillow. I think I got it off Amazon for $4. Put that over my eyes, put my AirPods in, and I just feel cocooned with a blanket over me. And I listen to that sound bath until I am ready to leave that space and feel calmer. Feeling any of this doesn't mean you made a mistake. It means the feelings are doing what feelings are supposed to do, processing the experience that now you have the bandwidth for. Pain is your teacher, but it doesn't mean you need to regret or move backward when you feel pain. It teaches us how to treat others, how to have expectations for others to treat us, and it teaches us when we need to protect ourselves. One of the most disorienting things about this divorce emotional timeline is that anger often shows up long after you expected it, whereas during the divorce itself, you may be in pure logistic modes, documents, custody schedules, finances, kids. The anger doesn't really have anywhere to go, and you got no space for that. Ain't no time for that. So you just keep moving. And then months later, maybe years later, you're somewhere completely benign. You're driving to work, doing laundry, making dinner, and something that happened hits you. What actually happened, what was actually said, what was actually done, and you get furious in that moment. That is not about being stuck. It just means that you're processing it on a timeline that probably most people do too. It's not regression. It's anger doing what anger is supposed to do, arriving when you have the bandwidth for it. Research on post-divorce adjustment consistently shows that anger often peaks 6 to 18 months after separation, not during it. You're not falling apart. You're finally feeling it. So let it move through you. Don't perform being over it before you actually are. Pretending not to be angry is a great way to get more angry. There is a gut punch that I don't think most people prepare you for, and I definitely wasn't prepared for. And this is stuff with your kid. There is a specific moment for me, and I have heard versions of this from almost every person I know who has gone through divorce, when the emotional weight shifted from your own experience to your child's experience. Not in an abstract way, but a really visceral, gut level way. It's specific moments that your kid experiences that you can't do anything about. Things that they see, things that they hear, things that they're going through that you can't fix. And that sucks as a parent. It's about the uncertainty of what their world looks like when they're not with you too, right? You don't know exactly. And if your kids are really young, if they come back upset from their other parent's house, it could be benign, right? They could have just like missed mom and be having a hard time with transition, the same way they do when you pick them up from school. And then there's fears in the back of your head, like, what's happening when I'm not there? So this is all part of what you deal with when you're going through a divorce. There is really nothing more gutting than not knowing if your kid is safe and loved and in good hands when they're not with you. Nothing. I don't have a workaround for that feeling. I just want to say it and I want you to hear it because I've experienced it. And if you're in it, you know what I mean. And I want you to know it too. Feeling it doesn't mean that you failed your child. It means you're paying attention. And paying attention is exactly what your kid needs. One thing I learned is that while we shouldn't artificially introduce hardship to our kids for the sake of them experiencing hardship, trying to shield them from any and every challenge that comes their way doesn't give them the chance to grow and doesn't give you the chance to trust and believe in your kids' abilities to handle life. Because they're going to have to be out of your home someday, right? And they're going to have to be able to handle things on their own. You did, right? Here you are, you're getting divorced and you're figuring it out. And your parents are not most likely holding your hand every step of the way. Your kids having a hard time does not mean you did the wrong thing. And they might grieve the divorce or be angry 10 years after the divorce. So might you. And that's okay. So what do you do when this timeline doesn't feel like it makes sense to you? The biggest thing is to stop trying to do it right because there isn't a right way to do it. There isn't a right timeline. You're always in the right place for where you are. Get a therapist if you don't have one, not because something is wrong or wrong with you, but because the emotional material of divorce is substantial. It really needs somewhere to go that isn't your kids. Hopefully you're not overwhelming your coworkers with this information. Hopefully you're not discussing this on all the dates you're going on. And sometimes you need relief from it in your friendships too. And you definitely don't want to be talking about this with your ex. A professional container for this experience is one of the most practical things you can do. It keeps the feelings from leaking into every other area of your life. Tell one or two people in your life where you actually are, not the I'm fine version, but the real version. You don't need everyone to know, but you do need someone to know. It's someone that you trust. And don't let the good phases convince you that the work is done. And don't let the hard phases convince you that the good phases were a lie. Both are part of the same true thing. Whatever you're feeling right now is not the feeling you're going to have in 6 months. That's the only promise I can make to you about this. It will not always feel like this. If it feels right now, you're allowed to let it. If it feels terrible right now, that's also real and also temporary. Both are part of it. Neither one is wrong. You're not doing this wrong. The timeline is yours. There's no behind. On the next episode, we're going to talk about who are you without this marriage? Because there's a version of you that exists when nobody around is asking you to be smaller. And we're going to talk about finding her. I'll see you then. If this one resonated, share it. Somebody in your life is white-knuckling through this right now and would really benefit from hearing it. I'm Rachel. This is Breaking Upward, and I'll see you next week.
This is your reminder from me and Alice that Breaking Upward is not legal, financial, or therapeutic advice. Please seek out a professional for your specific situation.